This last week has actually been a little bit on the cold side. It's been right around freezing all day and night, a little bit below during the night and a little bit above during the day. So it was actually a really good test for my heater. So the heater was able to keep up with it okay. I had to run it on high just to maintain 60 degrees. And the problem with that is that it does use quite a bit of power. It doesn't use a lot of diesel, it's just the electricity it uses a lot of. Before I was able to use my battery for about a week before I needed to recharge it. But when the temperature dropped that low, I would have had to run my generator, every other day basically to keep things charged up, which would be fine if I was driving a lot or something like that, but I'm stationary during the week because I have to work. So I started experimenting with some different insulation techniques. So the first thing, which was quite obvious that needed to change, was there was this cold draft coming from the front of the van, and that I'm not exactly sure where all that's coming from. Some of it's coming through the air conditioner, I know. A little bit's coming through the door, something's coming through the windshield area, but it's not super well insulated up there, and it's not going to be either. So I decided to create a barrier between the living space and the front of the bus, because I never actually do much of anything in the front of the bus when I'm living in the bus. So I don't really need to access it all that often. So what I decided to do is use one of my quilts and hang it up, creating a barrier between those two spaces. And that's worked really well, actually. That alone increased the temperature in the body of the bus at night by a couple of degrees, and I was using considerably less power almost immediately. You could really feel the difference even while I was hanging it up. It stopped that cold draft from just kind of blowing through the bus. I might replace this blanket with something a little bit thicker. I was thinking of actually using a moving blanket because they are reasonably priced and I can find them at Home Depot. So I might go that route, but I have some other things I want to try first. The other two things that I did, which worked surprisingly well, is I needed to insulate the floor. That was obviously very cold. It's just thick piece of wood composite something or another, and it's not doing a good job of insulating. So I discovered that my exercise mat happens to be exactly the same size as the footprint of the floor area. So I just unrolled that, put it down. It's about a 3/4 inch of closed cell foam, and it's a lot easier to walk around inside the bus with my shoes off now as well. So the ceiling of my bus actually is insulated. It has behind all the metal is about 1/2 inch foam insulation, I think. And so that does an okay job, I think. The vent itself in the roof, I think, is leaking a little bit of air, but I don't know exactly if I'm going to actually do anything about it. If I find some extra foam laying around or something, I might cover it up, but for right now, it's just going to stay the way it is. But the other really obvious place where I'm leaking lots of heat is out my windows, and I love having windows in the bus, but when they're leaking out this much heat, I definitely need to cover them up. So I decided the best way to do that was going to be with some rigid foam insulation. So it's just going to be basically styrofoam, 3/4 inch. I had originally planned on getting 4x8 sheets of 1/2 inch foam at Home Depot, but I discovered that there were these pre-cut 4 by 14 inch, 3/4 inch foam slabs, which were actually a little bit less expensive, and the 14 inch width is actually very close to what I needed, so I decided to try doing that first and seeing if I can make that work. The whole thing ended up costing about $25. If this works, I'll probably go back and get another one tomorrow on my way back to work, but I have really high hopes for this, and that should cover up my windows and keep the heat from escaping there. Another thing that I did for a variety of reasons is I covered up my piano with a quilt, and I did that partly to protect the piano a little bit better, and partly because if I cover up that space, the wall behind it is insulated, and there's also 3/4 inch piece of wood that's sitting on the wall there, so that helps with insulation, but just having lots of covered airspace back in there, I thought would help, and it did seem to help a bit. Okay, so I installed all the foam boards where I want it, and we'll see how this goes. I may or may not want to install a little bit more, but all the windows are covered now in the back part of the bus, so that should help a lot with insulation. I can already tell you that it's added a lot to the sound insulation. But anyways, I did have to do a little bit of fitting to get everything to fit in nicely, and I think it all looks okay, especially since my walls have a lot of just exposed foam on them now, but I think it looks alright, and it should help keep the place a lot warmer. It's nighttime now, and it's about 5 degrees Celsius outside, and the temperature is dropping a little bit. Before, when it was that cold out, I would be able to leave the heater on a lower setting and get it somewhere between, 13, 14 degrees. Right now I have the heater, it seems to be on a low setting, and we're sitting right at 18 degrees, and the insulation seems to be working. It is definitely much more uniformly warm in here, so I would definitely consider this a big win. I don't think I need any more insulation right now. The only thing I will change is probably that blanket that's separating the cab from the rest of the bus. It doesn't really reach the floor because it's just too small. I think I can find a blanket that's a little bit thicker and has a little bit more insulation, and that will help keep all the heat in the back of the bus here. But overall, I'm really happy with the way this has worked out. The other side effect that I've noticed is that it really cut down on all the noise that's outside. I can barely hear anything that's happening outside the bus now. So the insulation both works on sound and heat. Anyways, I'm heading back to work tomorrow, so the good news is I'm going to be nice and warm, and I should be all set for my trip in January. The last thing I really need to do is get the oil changed on the bus, and I should be pretty much ready to go. It's been a couple hours now, and I've noticed it's now 22 degrees in here. And since the heater first dropped down to its low setting, it hasn't turned on to high at all, so this is really good news.